Hello and welcome to Between Two Servers, the show where we talk about multiplayer game development and netcode. I'm Glenn, and here's Matt and Ben from OneCode.com. They're doing a really cool thing in Guam for esports we're going to talk about today. Matt and Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Glenn.
Cool.
Good to be here.
Cool. So what's your background, Ben?
My background is in telecommunications and esports, and a mix of IT before that.
Cool.
So I started out life as just a help desk junkie at Queensland University of Technology, just resetting passwords, and then
Brilliant.
slowly work my way up.
And you did some esports stuff with LAN tournaments?
Yes, I did. I ran LAN parties for years and helped out larger LAN parties bigger than my own, and attended, LAN parties. I used to drive from Brisbane to Sydney every 2 months to go to a LAN party.
That's awesome. So what's your background, Matt?
My background's in law primarily, so I'm a recovering lawyer at the moment. So don't hold that against me. But yeah, that's where I came from. Primarily working in the technology field. So that's how I ended up, starting OneCode.
Good stuff. So I understand that you and Ben were actually at QUT together, but you didn't know each other yet.
Yeah, no, we would have crossed paths at the same times, and we may have even been in some of the same classes, although I think both of us probably didn't go to class as much at the time, which is probably why we didn't cross paths.
That's interesting.
And if you look out there, if you dig deep enough, you'll find some photos of me at the time. I looked very different. I had long blonde hair, and was living at a residential college at another uni in Brisbane.
Okay.
So look, like the amount of time I spent at uni was minimal, but I still passed and got my degree.
You got the degree, so congratulations. So Ben, I understand that you started an ISP when you were 22. Why does someone start an ISP when they're 22?
Because I don't like lagging game.
Okay.
I never, networking always intrigued me, and that might have been the giveaway when I started running LANs when I was 18. So like my first network I built was when I was 12 or 13 in my own home for, my family.
Yep.
We had a network, friends used to come over and they were surprised that our 5 computers could play games against each other in the same house. And I don't think that ever stopped being a thing for me. I always loved building, not necessarily just networks, but just building things. And then I sort of decided, how hard could it be?
Okay, so you just went and did it. So what does it take to make an ISP? What do you do?
Well, it really depends on, the somewhat loose definition of an ISP. I built what we call a layer 2 ISP. So I bought capacity from Telstra, from a company called Opticom. And then as NBN was rolling out from NBN, and then I would collect that traffic in a city, and then I would then handle all the routing from your nearest capital city to the rest of the globe by buying capacity from other backbones and doing things differently than everyone else, so making my own unique decisions with how your network would work based on a gaming.
How did you make your ISP unique? Like what is it that you're starting an ISP for when there are a whole bunch of different ISPs out there?
So what I did back then was I disabled a feature on the predominant last mile technology called ADSI, disabled interleaving, which took 22 milliseconds off of people's consent connections, which is
That's a big deal, especially if you're playing in the same city. That could be
if you're a competitive CS:GO player at the end of a 3-kilometer ADSL string, the interleaving was quite a big latency.
That could even have been most of it gone right there. Hey, that's awesome. So Matt, tell me about how you came to this. So you don't necessarily have exactly the same technology background, but from the technical lawyer area, you and Ben ended up sort of combining and forming OneCode. So how did you come at it?
Yeah. I came at it from the legal angle. So I'm a technology lawyer. I was a technology boy by trade. I started in law, probably 6 or 7 years ago. Started in litigation of all things, actually. So a lot of court work. Got sick of having to appear before judges and dealing with people at their worst, and wanted to really move onto the other side and kind of helping people stay out of that and do things better at what they call the front end. And what I realized pretty early on was that there just weren't that many technology lawyers out there. Meanwhile, the technology sector is booming. You had all these new software as a service companies, a lot of new telecommunications companies coming up, and they were taking advice from like property lawyers, and so you'd see some of these contracts coming across your desk, and they look like a property contract or just a commercial contract. They didn't factor in any of the unique parts of the tech world. So they wouldn't talk about where the data is being stored, how it's being developed. They wouldn't factor in things like open source software, and just deal with all the little niche issues. There was a lot of GDPR stuff coming out at the time as well, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. And that really worked well because I'd always had a passion for tech. I was running a tech podcast on the side and doing some consulting as well. So and that gave me like a good breadth of experience with a number of businesses, and you almost fall into almost like a business advisor role with a lot of these businesses as well as a legal advisor. And frankly, I just got sick of helping other people build their own companies and wanted to do something in my own, which was exactly why we eventually fell into OneCode.
That's awesome. So you got the entrepreneurial itch. Brilliant.
I did. And it's been an itch I've had for a long time, but you've just got to find the right way to scratch it, right? And this was very much the right way to scratch it. So
you started up OneCode, and when you first started it, you created it as a last mile ISP.
It was.
What led you to that? Like, why did you start there as a wireless ISP?
Look, honestly, it was quite a reactionary decision, I think, just because the biggest pain point in Australia for the last few years has really been the what they call the National Broadband Network. And the National Broadband Network is a $60 billion-ish project by our federal government. It's been a political football.
So that's like fiber optic to pretty much every home. Is that what that is?
Well, that was the original pitch.
I forgot that. Okay, here's the football part.
All right. Yeah, if you remember, we went through a period where we had about 5 different prime ministers in about 2 years. Like it was the most bizarre period of Australian political history we've ever had. And NBN was the big hot ticket item. And that was what was getting kicked around like a football. And so we started with a fiber to every home project, which would have been bloody amazing. It would have been incredible.
Exactly what we need, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was meant to future-proof us for, the next 30, 40, 50 years. And what we ended up with was like this Frankenstein of technology where we had some fiber, a lot of old copper, some fixed wireless, and it's just not fit for purpose. So there's a lot of areas that are really underserved. And the goal for OneCode in that very early stage was let's target a couple of areas, build out a last mile wireless ISP because wireless had come a long way, serve them, and then scale the business.
Okay, so you're routing around the whole fiber to every home. You're not going around digging channels and putting fiber to people's houses. You're like, let's do it wireless. We'll just get around all this BS. Yeah. And then at that point, Ben joins, and Ben brings in all this technical expertise around networking.
Yeah. And what Ben really like, what the first thing he really impressed upon us and told us was that the rot goes a lot deeper. And Ben, I don't know if you want to discuss a little bit about exactly how the behind the scenes work once you leave the NBN as well, and how bad that is too.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess there's this illusion in Australia that all the problems begin and end with the NBN, and the ISPs are not at fault. They're just these Aussie battlers, just trying to make a dollar and trying to get along. But it's really not the case. There's a lot of poor networking decisions, poor routing decisions, networks built to cost, not to quality or to standard. And a lot of, if you saw it, you'd sort of scratch your head. You'd go, hang on, why are they doing that? Why are they sending all your traffic to Melbourne? Because that's where they interconnect with one other network. It's the only place they do it. And for commercial reasons or to gatekeep their network, they purposely don't interconnect with that network in Sydney.
Okay, so you're saying for an interconnection, it's two networks connecting to each other,
so
and
two ISPs or two
ISPs. So they're not necessarily sending your traffic they're not really sending it the best way or the right way all the time.
No.
It's sort of the outcome of really weird political and or cost, or what sort of things have you seen in this? What makes you say that the rot is going a lot deeper here?
Well, ISPs that will purposely trombone your traffic. So say you live in Sydney and you want to connect to a server in Los Angeles, but the provider that server resides on doesn't pay your ISP the tax The ISP feels they should be getting paid, so they send your traffic via Singapore just out of spite.
And Singapore is quite out of the way on the way to.
It is.
Los
It's an
Angeles.
extra. It's like a 13,000 kilometer round trip, additional. Scenic route, as we call it, scenic route routing internally as sort of a joke. We've seen it. We've seen it plenty of ways. We've seen a recent tournament we ran. Server was in Guam, player was in Mongolia. Mongolian ISP took it to LA first because.
Okay, so why is this happening?
I think generally the biggest driver behind this isn't a technical driver. Like, all credit to the engineers in these ISPs, they want to do it properly. It's usually a commercial driven decision. It's the upper management and C-level purposely gatekeeping access to their users because they want to sort of make money on both ends. If you think of your ISPs, charging you, $50, $80, $90 a month for your, whatever HFC cable DSL connection you're on, and then the ISP tries to charge the other side. So they try and charge me to then connect to them.
So you as in OneCode, or is it another network or some hosting
me, or as the only other guys I usually peer with are people they consider on their level, which would be an example like Telstra would happily peer with, say, Comcast, because they have a very mutual build size. But as a content provider, Telstra is going to try and charge me as much as they can, and we have seen.
So you're talking about the
seriously eye-watering.
This is like paid interconnects versus free interconnection.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. And it's not even, they go so as far as they won't even participate in what we call neutral peering exchanges in cities. So, in most countries in the world now, there's a group of people who have set up these neutral exchanges, which are very reliable, and there's no technical reason not to connect to them. And it's not like they don't already have their network in the same data room, usually in the same meet me room sitting there. They just flat out refuse to connect to these peering exchanges and exchange traffic because they know if they gatekeep their users, people will come to them and pay because they'll have no option.
Got it.
Because the user doesn't know any different.
Is this something that's specific to Australia?
No, this is everywhere in the world. Believe it or not, although Australia is probably more expensive, it's much easier because they know the game. In America, it's far more difficult to even open that line of communication with the ISPs in the first place. Mm-hmm. And then once you do open the line of communication, you get the wrong person the first 25 times until you finally find that one guy or girl or person in the organization who handles that. And then it's a 6 month. You send them an email, and 6 months later, they send you back a quote and you fall off your chair with laughter.
So to put myself in sort of the situation of something that game developers are used to dealing with. So most game developers don't run their own servers and don't really co-locate. No, we don't tend to do that. And that's not my background. So I usually rent servers from a company that has them already set up and they're already doing connectivity. So here you're effectively saying that the companies hosting bare metal servers are not always necessarily able to get the best route from every ISP.
Correct.
And in fact, the ISP may be charging them for that privilege.
Definitely trying to charge them. Yeah.
That's crazy. And so if anyone's wondering why you're not getting good latency from one point to another all the time for every game you play, here's a big reason why. And it's not technical, right? Hey, so Matt, let's flip over to your point of view. So you're looking at this from a legal point of view. What's going on here?
Well, it's really funny because like the similarities between the legal sector and the telco sector are stark. And I feel like the legal sector, at least you can kind of understand why. So a lot of these people in the legal sector, even people I came up under, they're old school. They still write things on paper. They still want physical file notes and folders, and you're still operating on systems that were built 20 years ago. But the telco industry, I feel like, has a bit less of an excuse because all of the great stuff that we see, like we're sitting on a Zoom meeting right now talking with you, halfway across the world.
This is all what we're talking about is the infrastructure making this happen. And it's built on some really old, stinky rubber bands.
Exactly. Old tech. Old methodologies, if for an industry that facilitates all of our innovation effectively, it is really, really behind at that bottom layer. And that's a whole part of that rot story, right? And the incentives for that industry are very much now about price. Everyone is getting squeezed on price from all sorts of different vendors. And there's a lot of consolidation happening too. So as all these companies get bought out and bought out by bigger companies, the price drops, but invariably what's happening is the quality is dropping as well, and Ben mentioned earlier about the routing and, basically being sent places you shouldn't be. That's because all these companies are optimizing for cost. And
okay, so this sounds like a real perverse incentive, optimizing for the lowest cost rather than optimizing for the best experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've got as a society, I feel like we're moving and the technology is moving in a direction that's more and more latency sensitive, right? Latency is becoming more and more important. But the industry that's actually running the infrastructure with everything works on is moving the other direction. It's going, well, we're just going to send it where it's
good enough, right?
Yeah. And generally the cheapest routes are, where there's the most cables, right? And particularly in Asia Pacific, which is obviously where we're focused on at the moment. There isn't a lot. Like there's a lot of cables in some very distinct areas, but in a lot of other areas, there's not many. And so it isn't as cheap to send things quickly. And the problem is because it's so big, if you're routing for cheapest cost, you may be adding 100 milliseconds onto a route, and we saw that recently. We ran a tournament in Guam, and we'll talk about Guam later, but some of the directions that these ISPs were sending their customers.
I've seen this too. I've seen this with our stuff. I'm wondering, how does this happen? And now it's really, really clear. ISPs don't really have any way to distinguish the applications that are real time.
Yeah.
And they kind of just have to, they just see a bunch of traffic and packets, and they don't really have any incentive to do anything other than to send it the cheapest path.
That's right. And even if they wanted to, it's a mindset shift too, right? Like most of these international carriers and ISPs are building on equipment that's 20 or 30 years old. And, no one wants to be that guy in the boardroom of these big company that puts their hand up and says, hey, I think we should spend all of this year's budget on upgrading our entire network and optimizing for low latency, because invariably the questions will be asked, well, why would we do that? That's going to cost a lot of money. And how, and what benefit will that give us? Well, it'll cost us more as well. We won't make as much money. So it's an instant no from these companies. And that's why there's so many issues, because, they're just not, the incentives just aren't aligned. And
so you start OneCode, it's initially a Wi-Fi ISP for the last mile, and you're doing really good linking, and you're getting around a lot of the bad routes, and you're providing higher quality connectivity for the people who are taking your network. Brilliant. Yeah. And now COVID hits. What happened?
COVID was so obviously COVID has been a net negative for the world, right? It's been horrible, but I think for us, it really clarified the direction that we wanted to go in as a company, because data needs went up. And at the same time that data needs were going up, everyone was staying home. And some of the people that I guess suffered the most, or the suffering became a bit more pronounced, was the gamers, because all of a sudden you had all these gamers hitting infrastructure and realizing that actually the infrastructure is not up to scratch, and queue times in certain games blew out, servers overheated, people were getting routed all sorts of weird directions. And esports particularly, I mean, we all saw it, that, all the local events died. You couldn't go to a LAN. And so everyone was online.
So everyone went remote.
And look, we're Aussie and we've grown up with just horrible connectivity to the rest of the world for all our life, and we're all gamers. And so for us, we looked at that and we said, well, here's an advantage for us to start solving a problem. And as fortune would have it, at the time, a new cable was being landed on the Australian East Coast as well. And until last year, all of the cables, our subsea cables, which is where all the data goes, either landed in Sydney or Perth. Perth is on one side of the country, Sydney's on the other. But this cable landed.
Okay, hold on. So if I'm a gamer in Brisbane, and I'm playing on, say, Singapore, or even New Zealand, maybe New Zealand's not a very good example because Sydney kind of is on the way to New Zealand. But let's say Singapore. I was going down to Sydney and then back up past Brisbane again on the way to Singapore.
Either that, or you were going via Perth.
I can't imagine that going by Perth would have been a good idea.
No, because you're effectively going down to the bottom of Australia and then you're going across and then you're going back up. And even for Sydney, like anything, let's say you're a World of Warcraft player or something. If you were playing on a North American server, you were going down to Sydney and then across to LA that route. So effectively, you're always going down. You're always adding an extra hop. And,
so everyone thinks there's like as a network developer, like a network programmer. I'm not a network engineer like you, Ben, but I always kind of had in my mind the idea that major cities are connected, right? Like maybe we don't have the country stuff worked out as much as we should, but like everything's pretty good. But the reality is that the topology between countries isn't necessarily always there for every city.
No, it's very complicated.
So Ben, tell me about the way that you're solving this problem with OneCode and how you built that out. Once you guys got the cable landed in Brisbane, what did you do?
Well, yeah, I actually the idea I'd had it years prior. I'd been working on it since 2016, but that new cable really it was the last piece of the puzzle. Like I had one cable already that went that direction from Sydney, but it was owned by an incumbent ISP who sell it for nearly double the price of what we pay for the new cable. So that's the problem, is that I can solve a lot of problems, but can I also make those problems commercially viable? So I'm it's this tug of war we have internally where we can solve things a lot faster if we wanted to, but then could we ever actually convince anyone to pay us even cost price for that service? And the answer is, believe it or not, more often than not, no.
Okay.
When you talk to the developers, when you talk to the people hosting servers, if you told them, it's going to cost you $6,000 a month for a game server, they're all going to fall off their chair and laughter.
It is a price sensitive industry, honestly. People
think
it's rolling in money, but it's price sensitive.
And the big providers, they're always putting that downward pressure on the cost per CPU core, per gigabyte of RAM.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, that's the hand we're dealt. That's the game we have to play in. So we can afford to sometimes be a little bit more expensive if we can make a big value proposition that it's going to be still worth your money, but we can't go out and try and charge you, 100 times the price of what existing is out there just for 100 milliseconds, because most game developers are still going to say, look, I'd love to use it, but I can't afford it.
When you look at the total amount of traffic that a game is sending and you do the math on it, it's a lot of money to have a 10 or 100x price on bandwidth.
It is.
Yeah.
And games are still pretty low bandwidth. And that's the other thing too, is
that's true. For video and other applications, it's nuts.
That's it. That the minimum buy price for these cables, like the minimum commit you have to have of, say, 100 gigabit, that's a lot of, like, you can fit 1 million players inside a gig if you really, like, on Counter-Strike or something like that. Like, playing games actually doesn't use much traffic. Downloading maps and updates does. But once you're actually in the game, and Call of Duty players, I hear your pain every time you get a 145 gig update dropped on you on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. But once you actually get in the game, your traffic is very low. It's below 100 kilobits per second. This
sort of frames it very well for everybody, because what we've really got here, we're not talking about download, or that there's CDNs, and there's a legitimate industry built around optimizing download speeds, and we all love it. It's all good. It's to solve a problem in 2021. But here's the challenge. We have this class of applications, and they may not be sending a lot of traffic, but they're really sensitive on latency, packet loss, and jitter. And then we have this internet that really is just all about, like, well, how much can you download?
Yeah.
Can I watch Netflix in 4K? Like, it's not about what's my lowest ping, what's my lowest jitter, what's my lowest packet loss. And that's what games need.
Right? Yeah. And if you look at even like on these submarine cables, the SLA, like the promise they give us on latency, is always far, far conservative to what we actually achieve on the cable, which means if the cable ever has an issue and that latency jumps up, we can rarely come back to them and say, hey, the latency's gone up. What's the problem? They go, is it within the SLA? We don't care.
Okay, got it.
And ISPs will say the same thing to you on what we call backbone links, or what we call metro links between data centers. If you buy what we call an Ethernet link, which we tend to shy away from, we buy services called wavelength services, which give us...
So you buy a 10 gig wave from one point to another.
Yeah, a 10 or a 40 or 100 or even a 1 on some places where, capacity is expensive or constrained. But it means that we can get a guaranteed latency because there's no intermediary switching or
Because you're the one
ghost
running all of the
devices. Yeah,
hardware. Yeah.
that's it. You're
Okay.
buying you're buying at the lowest layer you can easily. And in metropolitans, we don't even buy waves. We tend to buy dark fiber and do it
Okay.
ourselves, again, just to ensure that latency never goes up, because the ISPs that, everyone else almost doesn't care about latency. They'll go, oh, if it's going to be, the best we can do is 60, let's promise 80, and that way we don't have to worry if the.
See, this really gets me, because when I'm playing a game, I can honestly tell you that as a game developer and as a player, an extra 20, 30, 40, 100 milliseconds, that's a big difference. That's not the same. But
no.
These networks are being built assuming that it's all pretty much the same. So,
yeah.
Hey, so going back to you, Matt, when that new submarine cable landed in Brisbane, what's the story?
Well, I thought that everyone would be jumping on it, right? Because there's a population of about 5-6 million people that would directly benefit from it straight away. It's the fastest link to Asia from Oceania, and the other cable that got laid on the other end, which goes up to Tokyo, is a similar story. It links everything super fast, and it terminates in a little place called Guam. Now, Ben was talking about the missing piece there. Like that cable really then let us say, and the same cable comes out of Sydney as well. So we're able to offer the same thing to the Sydney, the gamers from Sydney, but it was a path to Guam with low latency from the eastern coast of Australia that we could then hop over to Hong Kong. We could hop over to Singapore, we could hop over to Tokyo, and we could also hop over to LA. And when you look at a map and you look at Guam on the map, you'll see it's relatively central. And North America is a little bit further away, but it's still relatively central, particularly on a cable map, right? And there's submarine cable maps out there you can look at. We'd initially planned to, do that in maybe like a year or two, right? Like that was more part of the long-term plan. Hey, let's, we know there's something there. Let's move on that, work towards that. But with COVID happening, with the cable landing and no one really jumping on it, we were the first one, which was just incredible for a new startup.
That blows my mind, because you're like two guys in a garage. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and it was a Friday afternoon at about 4:30, and I called Matt. And at this point, we were really busy pushing hard for getting last mile built. And I remember calling Matt and saying, we need to talk about this cable, because we hadn't committed to the cable at this point. We tie kicked, we got the prices. And I remember saying to Matt, look, I really want to do this, but I don't want to send us broke doing it. So you tell me when the money's right, and then we'll go. And that was it. And then a month later, I called him and said, I don't think COVID's going away. And here is, demonstrated evidence of esports teams all getting shafted by COVID. Yeah. Here's demonstrated of especially Asia. Asia got hurt the most because unlike Europe, unlike America, it's not one contiguous big body of land.
Yeah, it's everyone's in different countries.
Everyone is dependent on subsea capacity.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ISPs in Asia, they just build to lowest cost very heavily, and they don't really care about where the traffic goes. And more importantly, even the content providers in Asia, they only build in the cheap data centers, because data center space in Asia is generally a lot more expensive than North America or Europe. And I remember saying to Matt, we have actually a window here, and it's just opened, I believe, now that COVID is, we're stuck with it for a while.
I'd say so. Yeah.
My thought is maybe we should revisit Guam, and I don't know if we should jump on it right now, or if we should wait a few months, if we should pivot. I'm not sure the best path. Here's the idea that I've dropped on the table, and I think it's pretty valid.
And we say go, and that's really the story, right? Like and the thing is with with everything Ben just said there is that it is a very underserved market. The incentives are almost conversely aligned, right? Like expensive data center space, expensive connectivity,
and what's crazy about it? It's the fastest growing gaming region in the whole world.
Exactly. And look, like, you know, people say, oh, there's not a lot of money there right now, which isn't even true anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's the largest by monetary value. If you look at the stats, it's the largest region in the world for gaming now. But that is just going to
5 billion people in
continue.
Asia. On a side note,
Yeah.
guys, just
Yeah,
like 7 billion people in the world, and 4.5 of them live in Asia. Like,
So you got,
I think it's
market.
about like 80 or 90 billion dollars of revenue coming out of Asia this year.
This is really, really serious. So basically, as a game developer now, I can see that you have a centrally hosted place in Guam that is latency neutral to all of the major regional areas that play gaming and esports in that area. And because it's in the center, and because you have these really good networks behind it, they can all play together instead of in their own little silos.
Yeah, and that's really the vision for Guam, and like we're calling it our hub model, right? And like there's going to be more of these down the track, but I think Guam is definitely the area that's most pronounced, and it's addressing a really big need in an area that's very underserved. And you know, and that's 100% right. Like, we've effectively got a DDoS protected network that's optimized for low latency. You know, it's protected at all the edges. Everything transits over our network and ends up at Guam. And the big thing with Guam is, like, you know, it may not be the lowest latency area to any of these. You know, you could host things more locally, but the more hyper local you get, particularly with certain types of games,
it's fragmentation.
Exactly.
As a game developer, there's a choice that you have to make between fragmenting your player base and having everyone play together. And the reality is that you really have to, no matter what you do, even if you put a data center in every city, all you would do is to have, you know, 100 different shards of your game running regionally. And often it's more interesting if you know that your game is good up to a certain point of latency, and you can get everyone centrally served by something in that region. That can be a really strong way to bring all those players together.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because everything at the moment is about player retention, you know. And the moment that you kind of drop into that twilight zone of, like, you know, queue times over a minute, or low server population, or, you know, people getting sent some weird, you know, from someone from Japan getting sent to New York server because they're playing at 2 a.m. in the morning or something, you start losing players. And, you know, and that's I think where that model really starts to shine, is like, well, we know that the latency is acceptable. We know that it's, you know, it rock solid to all these different areas. So let's consider that. And then if you add into the mix the fact that, like, the more you hyper localize, the more support burden you have, the more, you know, latent resources you have that aren't getting properly utilized. Remote hands, like, if you're rolling any of your own infrastructure, you need remote hands at each of those locations, and you need to, you know, be able to basically send them out at a moment's notice. Whereas with somewhere like Guam, you know, like we're simplifying it. We're just saying, hey, look, like, you can serve most of this region, and from Guam. Yes, you can still have satellite servers and infrastructure, and that's something that we do as well. But it makes sense as a backbone to, like, have a latency neutral hub that, you know, it just keeps it simple, and that's just your spot.
And that's I think one thing that Matt and I have to drive home to people is they assume when they jump on a call with us, we want them to dump all their servers. And we're not saying that. We're actually saying, look, don't change your servers at all initially. Just take one in Guam and let your algorithm start sending players there. And then when you see the balance, maybe buy 2 more in Guam and downscale on the edges a bit where you have less players. Because when you roll back to that initial point we made of the money, if you can have a always available game at a playable latency, people are going to stay. They're going to spend more money in your game. You're going to make more money. Like,
and if you have all the people from Tokyo, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Philippines, Vietnam,
big market in the Philippines. It's like
big deal, and they're all able to play with Australians at roughly the same latency as on the East Coast. And now it feels a lot like there's an eastern side of APAC central region now in Guam, whereas historically what we've done as game developers, from my experience, is Singapore has acted as that region, but that really is only caught Western Australia, which is Perth. And most of those Western Australian poor people, I'm so sorry for you guys, because they're not able to really play on Sydney servers, are they? Is that okay? Because we see so many of them. I see so many of them going up to Singapore.
It's probably much for muchness, isn't it?
It's about a coin flip these days. Like it's like 69 from Perth to Singapore, and on the cheaper cables, it's about 50 from Perth to Sydney. There is a fast path that gets you down in the 30s, which we are, we're investigating internally. Yeah. But it's not cheap. It's actually more expensive than submarine capacity between Guam and Singapore, which is kind of hilarious. It's the reason you'll see players from Perth on Singapore just quickly is that the matchmaking algorithm has so many players in Singapore. It's easier just to toss them Aussies in to top it up.
They get sucked towards.
They get sucked in just to fill up the server, right?
It's almost like a gravity well. Okay.
Yeah, well, if you think of and you would know this better than me, is a lot of matchmaking algorithms. If you open the console when you hit play a game, what it does is it's pretty crude. It just pings every region and then goes, okay, these 3 regions, and then it reports its latency to the matchmaking coordinator, and the coordinator then goes, okay, well, Sydney's your lowest latency. I'm going to toss you there. But when you're in Perth, it goes, well, actually, Sydney or Singapore, and then it goes coin flip Singapore. Off you go.
Yep.
And then the player has in a lot of games, the player has no control over this, right? They can't say, I want to play on Sydney.
I'm a big fan. There are some
developers.
I'm a really big fan of games that let you select the region, because when you basically as a game developer say, no, I know where you're taking on everything that player would want in their decision making. Maybe they have friends online right now in Singapore that they want to play with.
Well, I've got a great example here is when Valorant first came out. I don't think there was a shortage of Sydney servers. I think there was a shortage of Japanese players because myself and my friends kept getting dumped on Japan servers to top up their queues.
Oh, you're filling.
And my friends were in Perth.
Yeah,
my friends are in Perth. So like I'm on 95 ms, which is right on the top end. That's bearable. But these poor guys are on plus another 60 on top of that. So they're at like 150 milliseconds. And then we're playing against players on 2 because they're in Tokyo next to the server on fiber.
That's a tough one. So I think that's your excuse for that match.
And there's no button in Valorant. Like it shows you your latency to the servers, right? But there's no button.
I'm not terrible. I've just had high latency. Now we've discovered the motivating factor actually for creating OneCode, which is that you're terrible at CS:GO.
Oh, 100%.
I think we've actually but it's funny you say that, Glenn, because I think we've all got a bit of a chip on our shoulder. Like we all grew up with just run. I can remember I was in a Battlefield 2 tournament like 15 years ago or so, like a long time ago. And we nearly made it to we were like one step before they'd fly us to LA or something. It was awesome. Oh my God.
And then the internet crossed you that day. Right?
Well, we had to play this Korean team, and of course, there was no OneCode doing like a latency neutral area, right? So we had to play Korean servers, and I was in on our farm on an ISDN connection.
Yeah. That's going to go well.
I pulled the phone out because on ISDN if you need the 2 lines to make it possible. And we got rolled. We got completely rolled because of course we were on 150 milliseconds or something. These Koreans were on 1 in the middle of Seoul. They were good. They probably would have beat us anyway. But I will still to this day blame the latency.
So you heard it here first, folks. This is why OneCode was created. It's so that the future Matt Shearings of the world on their farms can play competitive Korean esports and have a fighting chance with 50% latency. Okay, so I'm a game developer, right? And I'm looking at this OneCode thing, and I go to your website and I look at the Guam thing. How do I work with you guys? What do I do? Tell me how I can use the stuff that you've built, Ben.
Well, sorry, I'm just torn because Matt and I have had a lot of calls. I don't want to think about how many calls we've had in the last 2 months alone with developers, and we've taken that feedback on board. And we're actually building a new service right now in the background, in the wings, to address this and make it as low friction as possible to get you guys, the developers, on. I don't know. I'm looking for cues if I can tell people about it. We haven't even told people internally in the company yet what we're building. 3 people out of 15 know what we've built.
Matt, do you know?
You can foreshadow it. We can foreshadow it, right? I think what we've learned. I mean, first of all, to answer your question directly, I'd say reach out to us because there is always a way we can help, and we can develop solutions for basically anyone. That's a big advantage of us. We're small. We will roll out the red carpet, and we've got like we can help wherever we need to, right? But there is a definite impression that we're getting that a lot of developers are looking for something a little bit more accessible at the moment, where most of our offerings are either bare metal or like a managed dedicated kind of service, right? Whereas the industry standard, of course, is moving a little bit more towards like an on-demand spin up, spin down kind of model. And we've heard that, so that's that's what's coming.
So I can see how this story goes.
Yeah.
So that's really good news. So what about if I am an esports tournament? Can you guys help me?
We can help you right now.
Certainly, right now.
Yeah,
we have
so I'll reach out. Like I'm running a tournament that's coming up in this date, and you can help me host centrally in Guam for APAC.
Depends on the game.
Okay, so
if the game is hostable.
Yes.
Okay.
Or if the game developer is open, like if you're an esports tournament, generally you have a good inroads with developer. If you can convince them to, pick up the phone and talk to us, and we can even just for the period of the tournament help them get a temporary server online, which we will do.
Yep.
There are certain games which you will know the name
tricky.
of, which they control their infrastructure with an iron fist. No one can host servers, nothing like that. We're sort of hands tied on that front, unless the developer wants to talk to us.
As long as you have a server binary and you can host the server, you guys can help out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And look, we're happy to work with, like, if there is a particular infrastructure provider that someone's using or to manage things or whatever, right? Like, we're happy to work with them too. Like, I think.
Well, like a good example would be like multiplay. A lot of game developers use multiplay, and that's the sort of thing that could work with you guys quite easily.
Correct. Yeah. And we're more than open to that. I mean, for us, this is about just like opening APAC up and actually like, giving people a better experience in this area first. And we'll move to the other areas after that. But we've got compute server resources there ready to go. They're all network attached. So if you're, whether you're a gaming developer or an esports company or whoever else, like it's relatively trivial for us to provision you a dedicated server, for example. Now, you've got access to the network. It's all DDoS protected, and away you go. And for us, I think the big thing is, like, if you've got doubts, just reach out, and like Ben said, we'll set you up with a test, so you can see what it's like, because it is a slightly new concept, right? It's very different to the way that things are normally provisioned, but. So we appreciate that it may need some testing before people are willing to spin up a lot of resources on an island like Guam.
No, it's brilliant. And I mean, look, the math certainly works out, and the latency numbers on your website, and we'll just bring it up here so you can sort of take a look and see the links and see the latency that we've got here. So everybody, look, I think it's awesome. And if I can announce this now as well, we're working together. So Network Next and OneCode, we're friends. And when you're using Network Next, we're using OneCode's network, and that's how some of the traffic in the APAC region is getting accelerated on Network Next. And so if you host in OneCode, you also get all the benefits of their networks. And even if you don't host in OneCode, if their link is amazing from one point to another, we can fix the bad routing from an ISP. So, but the one thing Network Next can't really do is we don't host servers. So if you want the best place to host your servers in APAC, give these guys a call, onecode.com. And that's it for the show today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Glenn.
Here's the hard truth. The internet doesn't care about your game. After all the blood, sweat and tears you put into making your game, you launch, and some players get terrible network performance. What can you do about it? Build your own internet? This is why we created Network Next. Network Next is a radically new way of linking networks together. It's a new internet. One where networks compete on a neutral marketplace to carry your game's traffic. Network Next puts you, the game developer, in control of the network. We monitor every player's network performance, and you choose when to accelerate them. Not only will you see better network performance for your players, you'll also have the security of knowing that if one network is congested, we switch to another in seconds. Now you control the network.